October 12th, 1953. My first day. The towering Gothic spires of Blackwood Manor Asylum pierce a sky the color of slate. They call it a hospital, a place of healing. But the air here is heavy, thick with unspoken stories and the faint, metallic scent of despair. I am Dr. Alistair Finch, and this is my first post after medical school. I came here with a heart full of hope, believing in the new sciences of the mind. I believed I could make a difference. This diary will be my confidant, a place to anchor my thoughts in the coming storm.
The head physician, Dr. Harding, gave me a tour. He's a man carved from granite, his eyes holding the detached weariness of one who has seen too much and feels too little. "Forget what they taught you in books, son," he said, his voice gravelly. "Here we are not healing minds. We are managing chaos." He pointed to the rows of silent figures in the day room. "Our job is to provide order. A quiet ward is a successful ward." His words chilled me more than the autumn wind whipping through the barred windows. They gave me my first caseload. Names on a page, diagnoses stark and absolute. Schizophrenia. Then I saw her file. Patient 734, name Catherine. No last name provided. Admitted 3 years ago. The intake notes were sparse, almost dismissive. Found wandering, unresponsive, presents with catatonic stupor. And at the bottom, a single handwritten annotation from a nurse. She arrived clutching a small, leather-bound book. Refused to let it go. I found Catherine in the women's ward. She was sitting by a window, looking out but seemingly seeing nothing. Her face was a placid mask, but her eyes held a flicker of something distant, a banked fire in a cold hearth. She was younger than I expected, perhaps my own age. In her lap, her hands were folded over a small, worn, green book. It wasn't a medical file. It looked like a journal, her journal. For 3 years she had not spoken a word. For 3 years she had held on to that book. Days turned into a week. I tried to engage her. I spoke to her about the weather, about the changing leaves outside the window. I read poetry to her from a book I brought from my own library. There was no response. The nurses were kind but pitying. "A lost cause, doctor," one of them, a gentlewoman named Eleanor, told me. "Dr. Harding thinks she's a candidate for the new procedure, the transorbital lobotomy." The words felt like a physical blow, a simple, brutal severing. I could not accept it. There was a person inside that silence. I was sure of it. The key, I felt, was the book. Her world was locked in that little green journal, and she was its silent guardian. During my evening rounds, when the ward was quieter, I sat near her again. "Catherine," I said softly, my voice barely a whisper, "I don't want to hurt you. I want to understand. Can you show me what's inside your book?" For the first time, her eyes shifted. They moved from the window and met mine. A brief, fleeting second of contact. It was a start, a crack in the ice. The next day I brought not a medical chart, but a pen and a blank sheet of paper. I set them down on the small table beside her. "You don't have to speak," I said, "but if there's anything you want to say, anything at all, you can write it down." Hopeful. I left the paper and pen with her. For the rest of the day, she didn't move. But when the night nurse, Eleanor, collected the untouched dinner trays, she found the pen lying next to the paper. Not on it, just next to it. It had been moved. Dr. Harding called me into his office. He had heard of my unorthodox methods. Dr. Finch, your job is not to become emotionally entangled. Patient 734 is a textbook case. Her brain is diseased. You are wasting time and resources on sentimental fantasies. I tried to argue, to explain the small signs of progress. He waved a dismissive hand. She is scheduled for the procedure at the end of the month. It is the most humane option. It will calm her. Humane? To extinguish the last embers of a soul? Uncertain. I felt a desperate urgency. I had weeks, maybe less. I dedicated every spare moment to Catherine. I learned she would sometimes hum. A faint, tuneless sound, almost inaudible. One afternoon, I recognized it. It was a fragment of a Chopin nocturne. That evening, I wheeled an old, out-of-tune piano into the day room. The other patients stared, confused. I sat and began to play the nocturne. It was clumsy. My skills were rusty, but I played it. And as the melody filled the cavernous room, Catherine turned her head. Where? Musimus nor baraswils ahowe. She didn't speak. She didn't move from her chair, but as I played, a single tear traced a path down her cheek. It was the first emotion I had seen on her face. Not sadness, not joy, just a release, acknowledgement. And then she slowly, deliberately opened the little green book in her lap. She didn't look at it. She just opened it. An invitation. My heart hammered in my chest. When I finished playing, I walked over to her. She was still staring at the piano, but the book remained open. With trembling hands, I reached for the journal. She didn't resist. I opened it. It was filled with the most beautiful, elegant handwriting. But it wasn't a diary of her time in the asylum. It was a diary of the life she had before. Her name wasn't Catherine. It was Clara. Clara Beaumont. She was a concert pianist. The diary was filled with notes on music, with descriptions of concert halls in Vienna and Paris, with passionate letters she had written but never sent. Sadly, with growing anger and empathy, I read about her love for a man named Thomas, a violinist who died in the war. I read about her parents, who saw her passion for music as a frivolous distraction and had her committed when her grief over Thomas consumed her. Angry, they had her silenced because her sorrow was too loud for them to bear. The diagnosis of hysteria was a lie. She wasn't insane. She was heartbroken. Her catatonia wasn't a disease. It was a fortress she had built around her shattered heart. Gently, with focused, deliberate tenderness. The next day I didn't address her as Catherine. I sat beside her, softly. "Clara," I said. Her head snapped towards me. Her eyes widened, a universe of shock and fear and recognition within them. "Clara," I repeated gently. "I've been listening to your music. It's beautiful." I began to read from her own journal, her own words about Chopin, about the feeling of the ivory keys beneath her fingers, about the applause that sounded like the sea. Her composure finally broke. A shudder racked her body. A low, guttural sob escaped her lips, the first sound she had made in 3 years. And then she spoke. Her voice was a dry, rasping whisper, cracked from disuse. "They took my music," she whispered, tears now flowing freely. "He is gone, and they took my music." She collapsed into sobs, a storm of grief 3 years in the making. I didn't try to stop her. I just sat there, a silent witness to her pain. The breakthrough was profound. But in the cold world of Blackwood Manor, it was seen differently. An orderly reported her hysterical outburst. To Dr. Harding, this was not progress. It was proof of instability. He confronted me in the hallway. "You see, Finch, you agitated her. You disturbed the peace of the ward. This is why we have procedures to prevent such disruptive episodes." He moved up her lobotomy. It was scheduled for the next morning. I was frantic. I argued, I pleaded. I presented the journal as proof of her sanity, of the trauma she had endured. Harding was unmoved. "Doctor," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "this facility operates on my authority. You have forgotten your place. If you interfere again, I will have you removed." My career, my future, it all meant nothing. I had to save her, not as a patient, but as a person. I had to save Clara. That night, I did something I never thought I would do. I broke every rule. With the help of Eleanor, the sympathetic night nurse who had seen it all, I planned. Eleanor knew of a small, unused service exit at the back of the grounds. She agreed to look the other way for 5 minutes during her final rounds at 4 a.m. It was a terrible risk for both of us. If we were caught, she would be fired, and I would face criminal charges. At 3:55 a.m., I slipped into the darkened ward. I went to Clara's bed. I touched her shoulder gently. "Clara," I whispered. Her eyes opened in the darkness. There was fear, but also trust. "It's Dr. Finch. We have to go now. I'm getting you out of here." I helped her dress in a simple coat over her thin hospital gown. Her only possession was her green journal, which she clutched to her chest. We moved like ghosts through the silent, sleeping asylum. Every creak of the floorboards was a cannon shot in my ears. We reached the service exit. True to her word, Eleanor was nowhere in sight. The old iron bolt was stiff and loud as I drew it back. A gust of cold, clean air hit us, the air of freedom. I had my car hidden on a dirt track a quarter-mile away. We ran, or rather, I half-carried, half-dragged her through the wet grass, her bare feet stumbling on the cold ground. We made it to the car. As I started the engine, I looked back at the dark silhouette of Blackwood Manor. Drove through the night, with no destination in mind other than away. Clara slept in the passenger seat, the first peaceful sleep she'd had in years. I eventually took her to a small, quiet convent in another state, run by a distant cousin of Nurse Eleanor's, a place where they would ask few questions and offer sanctuary. I gave them all the money I had. I left her there, safe. I never saw her again. I lost my job, of course. I was disgraced, blacklisted from practicing medicine in that state. But I have never, for one single moment, regretted what I did. I left the world of institutional psychiatry and opened a small private practice where I listened to my patients instead of just managing them. I don't know what became of Clara Beaumont. I hope she found peace. I hope, perhaps, she even found a piano. I failed the system, but I saved a soul. And in the end, I think that is what it truly means to be a doctor. June 4th, 1973. 20 years, 2 decades have passed since that frantic night. Blackwood Manor is a ruin now, a hollow skeleton shuttered by the state, a relic of a darker time. I am an old man. My hair is white, my hands are spotted, but my small practice remains. I never became famous or wealthy, but I have listened. I have always tried to listen. The diary entries have grown sparse over the years. What is there to say when life settles into a quiet rhythm? But today, something broke the rhythm. The morning mail brought a small, stiff envelope. Not a bill, not a medical journal. It was addressed in a familiar, elegant yet shaky hand. A hand I had not seen in 20 years. It was from Eleanor, the nurse who had risked everything alongside me. We had exchanged a few letters in the first year, then lost touch as life pulled us in different directions. My heart beat a little faster. Why now, after all this time? With hands that suddenly felt clumsy, I opened the envelope. Inside, there was no long letter, only 2 items. The first was a concert program printed on heavy cream-colored paper. An evening with Elena. The name meant nothing to me. The program listed a single composer, Chopin. The second item was a short handwritten note from Eleanor. I unfolded it. The note was brief. "Alistair," it began, "I am old now, and my health is failing. But I had to send you this. I felt you, of all people, deserved to know. I kept in touch with the sisters at the convent. They told me everything. After you left, she was silent for a long time. They thought she might never recover, but they were patient. They were kind. They had an old, forgotten piano in their recreation room," the note continued. "One day, about a year after she arrived, one of the sisters found her just touching the keys, not playing, just touching them, like greeting an old friend. The Mother Superior gave her permission to play. At first, the music was broken, hesitant. But then it grew stronger. It filled the halls. It was her voice, Alistair. She was speaking through the music. She never wanted to be Clara Beaumont again. That name held too much pain. So she chose a new one, Elena. For years, she only played in the convent's chapel, but her talent was too great to remain hidden. A visiting patron heard her play and was moved beyond words. He sponsored her. Eleanor's final words on the page struck me like lightning. The reclusive, brilliant pianist, known as Elena, is our Catherine, our Clara. This concert is her return to the world." I looked at the program again. The concert was in 2 days, in a city 300 miles away. There was no question in my mind. I canceled my appointments. I packed a small overnight bag. I felt a pull, a need to close this circle. Not for her to see me. No, I would not disturb her new life. But I had to see her. I had to witness the final chord of the story I had helped begin. The concert hall was magnificent, a world away from the peeling paint and despair of Blackwood Manor. It was all velvet seats and golden light. I felt out of place in my simple tweed jacket. I sat in the back row, a ghost from another lifetime. The lights dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. And then she walked onto the stage. She was no longer the frightened girl I had rescued. She was a woman, poised and confident. Her dark hair was streaked with silver at the temples, but a face held a serenity I never thought I would see. She carried herself not with the absence of fear, but with the strength of someone who had faced her demons and won. She sat at the grand piano, her hands hovering over the keys for a long moment, and then she played. It wasn't just Chopin. It was her life. In the music, I heard the grief of her loss. I heard the silence of the asylum walls. I heard the frantic hope of our escape. And then I heard the peace of the convent, the slow, gentle healing. The final piece was a nocturne, the same one I had tried to play for her so long ago, but this was no clumsy attempt. It was perfect. It was a story of survival, of beauty reclaimed from the ashes. The applause was deafening, a standing ovation. Flowers rained down on the stage. I did not clap. I just sat there, tears streaming down my old face. I saw her stand and bow, a small, genuine smile on her lips. She was whole. She was free. My role in her story was finished. I slipped out of the concert hall before the final encore, my heart full. Tonight, I write what I know will be the last entry in this diary. I saw Clara. I saw her fly. The greatest successes of my life were not recorded in any medical journal. They exist in the quiet peace of a soul allowed to heal, in the triumphant sound of music filling a concert hall. I did not cure a disease. I simply opened a cage, and the bird, after all this time, remembered how to sing. And that has made all the difference.